It's Coffee Talk on FM 94.7 and AM 1450. And with me is Kobai Scott Whitney. And we have been, talking about, we ended up talking about the fact that religion in a lot of cases represses females, much as life in general over different parts of the world has repressed females. Now, it's interesting, the Catholics, they have, of course, the Mother Mary is female, and she has a lot of weight, so to speak.
Right. Well, the hierarchy is always fast to point that out, that we revere the Virgin Mary and so on and so forth. However, if you look at the history, we think, or actually it seems pretty apparent from research, that women were very prominent in the early church, very prominent. And we even have the Gospels of Mary Magdalene and so on that have been discovered in the last century in this, or not the 21st, but in the 20th century. So the place of women was much more honored, and we're still in the situation where, as you and I were talking off air, where men seem to really, really fear women being in charge. And yet, we really need more balance in our faith communities between the male and the female assets.
Now, I'm not going to mention any particular religion, but I bet you there's some religions where if it were the Titanic, it would be boys and men first, and the women and the children would have to stay on the boat. I'm not going to mention any names, but...
All right.
Yeah, but I bet you there are some that would think that way.
Well, there's some ship captains who seem to think that way, too.
Yeah. Well, let's go to our listener line. Hi, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Morning.
I think you have it half right. I think it's weak men fear women in charge. Strong men don't.
I agree with that, because I've seen that a lot of times where you'll have a guy that's running a company and then he says, well, I have to find out what my boss says. Right?
Right.
Yes.
Anyway, what I called for, I want to ask your guest a question. I've not been a member of a church for quite a few years. I still consider myself a Christian, even though I don't go to church every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But my question to you is, I may be out of touch. What is the responsibility of a minister or a priest or a father or whatever when it comes to his congregation and that person being ill? Now, do they still minister to these their congregation, as far as if one's ill or in the hospital or
yes.
seriously or in a...
Most faith communities have some structure for doing that. Now, for instance, here in the harbor, those of us who are ministering in the community, no matter what our denomination, have credentials or a badge at Grays Harbor Hospital, supervised by Chaplain Dave Munson. And his job, any chaplain's job, is to make sure that people of any faith are taken care of. So now, some congregations have special people appointed to take care of the sick. Some people don't have the talent, for instance, to be with someone who is dying. Mm-hmm. They just can't deal with it, or they can't deal with hospitals. It's very unpleasant for them. But other people do have those skills, and many times the congregations will pick out, sometimes it's called a deacon. That's actually was the original role of deacons, was to be the interface with the community. And so to go to the prisons to visit the sick and so forth. So yeah, there are arrangements, and it is a primary mission of not just Christian groups, but of most of our organized religions to take care of the sick and dying.
Don't you think it's unusual if someone's been a member of a church for a long time and has been seriously ill for quite a while now, like over 2 years? Don't you think it unusual that even though the head of the church knows about this person's illness, that they haven't once even contacted her by telephone to even give her sympathy or anything? I just find it just amazing.
Well, you have a particular instance and
Yes.
particular people in mind, and I don't want to step in the middle of that.
I understand that.
But
I thought, well, maybe, just maybe, they didn't do it. When I worked at the hospital, we had the different ones come in all the time.
right.
And when I was in surgery, getting ready for surgery, some of those ministers that knew me from me working there came in and saw me and said a prayer with me and stuff like that. This is what I'm used to.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is just so unusual that I just wondered if they quit doing that.
Well, we go back to Doug and my previous discussion about what is how to judge a good faith community or a good leader. If that leader and that community cannot help out its sick, it's dying, it's unemployed, it's mentally ill, if it does not have the skill to do that, you got to evaluate whether
Well,
to stay
I
in
agree
that.
with you 100%. I really do agree with you, and I'm very disappointed in this person, and because I've always liked him, and but I was curious if they had changed their way since I worked, because it's been 20 years since I worked at the hospital, and so, or almost.
No, I don't think there's been changes. Even the Catholic Church now that requires, a priest to do a lot of things, now has what they call Eucharistic ministers. So they can take communion to people who are homebound or people in the hospital, and it's pretty well organized in most churches that have been around a while.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. It's 7:45, and this is Coffee Talk on FM 94.7 and AM 1450. And Kobai Scott Whitney is my guest, and our listener line is open. 533-5259, 533-KBKW is the number to call. Oh, let's take this caller now. I've got one coming in. So, hi, you're on the air.
Hi, Doug.
Hi there. How are you doing,
Hi,
Dave?
Kobai.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Doug, you haven't brought up Titanic, and I was just wondering if you had to sit on your hands or if you got in trouble with Lori.
The 3D.
And I was wondering, you might tell Kobai why you were looking forward to it and see how, from the Buddhist perspective, if there would have been an issue with seeing that scene in 3D.
Oh, okay. Well, now what happened was now the Titanic is in 3D
Right.
now, and we had planned to go to the movie for quite a while because I read reviews on it in the Wall Street Journal. Who was very hard on movies. Sometimes said it was fabulous, that the 3D was not overdone, and so on and so forth. Well, the Chinese have Titanic overseas now in 3D, but there's a scene in there where Jack is painting. I'm trying to remember her first name, Rose, painting Rose, and she's naked. Well, what the Chinese did is they banned that scene for fear that the 3D would cause people to try and grab her boobs and get their hands in the way of others that are trying to watch what's on the screen.
Oh.
Okay, well, it wasn't done that way. People just look like they're three-dimensional. They don't look like they're projecting things out beyond the screen.
Now, is this the same one with DiCaprio?
Yes.
It's been made into 3D?
Yes, they made it into 3D, and they have a process that they
Oh.
use that is actually better than shooting it in 3D live, because you can adjust the 3 dimensions to make it look more natural, and it absolutely made the movie even better.
Really?
Yes, and the glasses they have with this new system that they have doesn't darken the screen very much at all. and it doesn't give you a headache trying to watch it. But it was amazing because you were watching this thing, and it's like you're in the movie because you see people as three-dimensional. Period, all the way through, and it was amazing.
Wow.
I suggest you go see it, Dave. You'll be impressed.
Now, what's the
All right,
Buddhist
so-
angle on this?
What would the Buddhists say about would they ban people, or would you have to cover your eyes to see this?
Well, if you were a monk,
Oh.
you wouldn't be. You shouldn't even go because frivolities are banned for monks and nuns.
But now, what about the cut version? There's not frivolity in this. There's people dying.
I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know. That's a difficult question.
All right. Well, thank you, guys.
All righty.
I'm just
Bye-bye.
I'm just happy to know you can use the word boobs on the radio.
Oh, I think so. But anyway, yeah, it was. You know what they ought to do, and I bet you MGM's just coming out of bankruptcy, but MGM owns the Wizard of Oz,
Oh, right.
and it's been put into high definition, and it's been cleaned up to where it looks like the original now. That would be a movie that I think would be a huge hit in 3D. Black and white, 2D at the beginning, just like the movie. And then when they hit the Land of Oz, go color and 3D, and the kids would freak out. And that witch's nose would come right out at you.
Okay.
That wicked green witch.
We'll send MGM a memo.
Sure. Well, they're making a lot of money off this 3D version of the Titanic. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi there.
World War II. In World War II, a priest, a Jewish rabbi, and a Protestant clergyman were on a troop ship. The troop ship was sinking. The three religious leaders took off their Mae West vests that they had and gave them to other people. I think this represents the highest example of clergymen leading or expressing the religion. And I don't know that I don't believe all clergymen today have that, have the same ability to do this.
Well, all clergy of any era probably did not have the same ability to do that. It's, we hope for the highest standards, especially among those leading faith communities. But, when you started this out, I thought you were going to tell one of those jokes, and I was trying to remember the one about the Catholic and the Catholic priest and the rabbi, and
on a train eating lunch and one thing and another.
No, this was on a plane, and the plane was gonna crash, and they were missing one parachute, and it's a very funny joke if I could only remember the punchline, but at this age, I don't know. I've read about. I've read 2 or 3 books, 3 I believe, books on Buddhism. One of the best was written by a woman who went to Japan before World War II and studied Zen Buddhism. She was a Zen Buddhist. I think Ruth Suzaki Fuller.
I don't remember her name, but she wrote an excellent book. But I read that Buddha's brother is the one who argued with him that women needed enlightenment and should be taught Buddhism.
Ananda, who I mentioned was his attendant, was his cousin. So there was a relationship there. But the Buddha also eventually ordained his own son. Remember, the Buddha was married.
Yes.
Early in life.
And I believe he died eating
tainted pork.
Poison. He thought they were some guy he was eating with someone. They gave him instead of mushrooms, they gave him toadstools. Accidental death.
Well, actually, from what we know, he died eating tainted pork, but that was revised when the scriptures went into China, because in China there was a very high value put on vegetarianism, and they didn't want it on record that the Buddha had accepted and died from eating tainted meat. The Buddha's own rules for his monks were, you need to eat whatever's offered to you. You can't pick and choose. If lay people put, a goat head and some rice in your bowl, that's what you eat, and you don't, pick and choose.
Okay, it's very interesting.
I'm going to have to run, Jim, because I'm way past my break time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Bye. But thanks for calling.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye. Coffee Talk on FM 94.7 and AM 1450 KBKW. And with me is Kobai Scott Whitney. And we had just a few minutes left. There's some other things you wanted to touch on today?
Well, no, I think just to remind people, you can get our calendar on our website at 3Ws and then plummountain.org. And our upcoming events are on there. We have Tuesday nights in Aberdeen at Rosemary Cottage is called Community Meditation, and that's designed for beginners. So don't worry if you don't know anything. You can come to that. And we'll be running some special workshops for seniors, people with limited mobility. And also I'm doing a 12-step retreat up in Seattle in a couple of weeks for people in 12-step programs.
Well, let's go to our listener line. Hi, you're on the air.
Hey, Kobai, how you doing?
Hey, good.
Really quickly, I know you only got a couple of minutes. What's your take on the Council of Nicaea? My direct thing is that from what I'm getting out of that whole debacle there was actually a vote. They actually voted. Men voted to see if they would elevate Jesus' status from like demigod as son to full-fledged deity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's your take on it?
Well, okay. Here's the thing. It's the emperor who saw in having a unified religion. He did not like all this fighting of people calling each other heretics and so on. There was a lot of that going on. And so he called the council. There were some other councils too around that time. But he wanted unanimity. And the big issue in those days was what's called now Christology. That is Jesus man or God? Or is he both? Or is he part of one and part of the other? And there were huge arguments about that. That was the biggest issue going on at the time. And the emperor wanted it settled. He didn't care how particularly. And that's where we get the Nicene Creed. There are other creeds, the Athanasian Creed, I can't think of them right now, but there have been lots of creeds, and those are frequently recited in the liturgy, in the weekly liturgy, and are kind of required recitation for believers. You got to have this.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
it was interesting because I was reading up on it, and it was like he comes into power, and like 5% of his territory, 5% of it was like Christian.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of those, there were like many different flavors of it, right?
Yes.
And all of a sudden he's like, well, go on this warpath after figuring out. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that,
well,
that was like
I agree, and I think it's fascinating from a historical and scholarly point of view that we could have ended up with a much different form of Christianity had another side won in any of
Or
these
none at
pivotal, or none at all, too. Yeah.
All right, thanks for the call.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. And, of course, Constantine's mother had a lot to do with that, too, didn't she? Because,
Helena, yes.
Because she became a Christian or whatever it was called at that time.
Right. Right.
Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Doug. It's always a pleasure.
And, by the way, you'll be able to go back and listen to this on our on-demand section on our website.